I feel like this past week was a long week. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it was a little bit of a long week. So if you're feeling kind of let's discuss what we're going to be doing today. We are going to be looking at what we did last Wednesday, talking about the KWL chart and strategy and how we utilize it in the classroom. We're going to review that and we're going to continue on with it, building a little bit more knowledge with English language learner strategies, which actually, as I always say, are best practices for any group. You know, native English speakers, special ed, ELL strategies are best practices for everyone. And so we're going to talk about and look at specific examples why that is. So without further ado, I'm going to turn off my video. Hey, Rico, nice to see you. Thank you guys again for meeting on a Saturday. So let's go and jump in. Lots of stuff here on my desktop. So this was what we worked on Wednesday, the KWL chart. And we sort of, when I chose this, can you not see my, hello?
Yes.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent.
Yes. Yes. I can see it, Miss Sauceda.
Okay, excellent. So on Wednesday, we began this sort of learning log, if you will. These are specifically modeled after Cornell notes, where you put the concept or the skill, you know, the focal, the theme. You could even draw pictures there. And then any notes, any revisions. And so we did this last week. And I started by asking you guys what a KWL chart was. What does it stand for? What does it mean? And so let's take a look at what we wrote, that it's know, wonder, and learned. And we said that the K and the W takes place before the lesson or the unit or the reading. And we use that information for many ways. This activity serves many people. It gives us data or helps us measure what they know before going into a topic or a lesson or a reading. But it also gets those cognitive juices flowing with students trying to extract prior knowledge, right? Trying to think of, what do I know about this area, and getting ready for the learning to take place. So excellent strategy. What we wonder, what do we want to know more about? What questions might we be thinking? And so we sort of did that for here, and the K portion was here. Planning and instruction for all students, because we did domain 1. And we ended with a really important chunk of domain 1 and also a really important chunk of domain 3, which you know, make up the largest chunks of the exam. So those two domains, everything about the ELL strategies, everything about the supports, we should be knowledgeable about in order to do well. Remember I said best practices for ELL students are literally best practices for everyone. So we're going to, well, all that we wrote, and I'm hoping that we're going to add more. I'm going to put Saturday here, whatever to date. Oh, it's April Fools. It's April the 1st. I remember having to teach April 1st on like middle school and high school campuses. Oh my goodness. It's like if April the 1st is on, the students come with all sorts of stuff, all sorts of pranks and jokes. Nobody can be taken seriously on this day. So this is our learning log, and we are going to be extending our knowledge of English language learners, ELL or English language learners. So we wrote a little bit. We wrote that part of planning, or what makes planning especially challenging, and why you guys should be paid at least a minimum of 100,000, is that you have to plan instruction that is appropriate for all the diverse needs of your students, their skill levels, their language proficiency, their interests, developmental levels, learning preferences. And so linguistic ability is really, really important. And I'll tell you something, in the real world right now on campuses, I have heard so many teachers say that the oral language proficiency of their students really took a huge hit during COVID. And I get that, because in order to gain access to more language, some more sophisticated language, you have to practice it, you have to hear it talked about, and that's what school does. It's a place for them to be concentrated, speaking and talking about these academic concepts. So with our ELL strategies, we wrote down the different proficiency levels with it that are described in the ELLs that show up in both domain 1 and domain 3 as beginner, intermediate, advanced, advanced high. Right? And that's important for us to know. But then we only listed just a little bit of actual things we could do. And those are the things that are going to be in the exam. You know, those are the types of answer choices they're going to give you once they tell you, oh, Miss Sauceda's diverse group of both intermediate and beginner ELL students. You're going to have to choose what activity, what strategy, what support is best for this particular group of students. And it's best strategy for everyone. And we only listed sentence stems, the learning log, which we were doing right now, you know, and we are doing the activity of going back and adding to what we already know and what we already learned. So if you were doing this by yourself, which at some point, you know, I want for you guys to be going through the standards and making sure you understand the you know, the weight of that particular standard. So let me just go really quickly so I can illustrate to you what I mean, and take a look at our actual standards. And if I go to standard 1 and I come down here, and you'll see it's just real like sort of one-off. Oh, and also appropriate strategies for instructing English language learners, just like as a one-off. Nothing telling you how or what that looks like, but there are hows and what it looks like. There's a very particular way in which you have to support the students linguistically, support their acquisition of a second language, while simultaneously staying afloat with the content, whether it be math, science, social studies, theater, PE. It's an incredible task. I you know, would constantly tell my ELL students how in awe and genius I thought that they were, because they were. It's an incredible task, and they do it, but they can do it even better with our supports. So again, you'll see it mentioned here, including the needs just as a one-off as part of diversity, and also doing these things. You'll notice in the standards, it doesn't tell you anything about Piaget. It doesn't tell you anything about social, intellectual, and physical, like the specifics of it. We have to know the specifics. So for English language learners, that's a really big chunk. It comes out in domain 1, which is only composed of standard 1. Standard 1's the biggest standard. It makes an appearance in both domain 1 and domain 3. And it only makes sense because it's about, you know, planning for your students. And domain 3 or standard 3 is about implementing effective instruction. Like once you've done the plan, you actually doing the action. So what strategies, what communication, you know, support did you have for the students in order to carry on conversation? So you'll see communication is the biggest sort of subsection in standard 3. You'll see that, let me see. Where is it at? Providing feedback to the students, that responsive teaching. Is you being engaged in the actual, we're supposed to be like facilitators of learning, right? The best model for learning is us being facilitators, and the students being given a problem or some sort of conflict or scenario or reading in which they have to question and learn from, or where they're just guiding them. That isn't always possible, but it is possible for us always to be there while they're doing the guided practice, while they're doing the independent practice. So if I'm walking by a student and I see that, even when they're doing writing for English language arts and reading, and I see that they made a run-on sentence, and we just had a lengthy discussion about that, I would not leave it till the kid turns in the essay so I can count off points for later on. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to go right then and there and say, hey, Javier, I see that. Check out sentence 4. I just want for you to just take a super good look at it. Think about last Wednesday, and then tell me if those something is funny is going on there. And obviously I'm going to continue on with that stuff, and they will remember, and especially some of these things, which are common mistakes, math mistakes, like not changing sign and the other. But when we're actively teaching students another language all the time, responsive teaching has to be on all the time, and a very focused and systematic type of teaching, which is why we see so many questions regarding ELL students. I want to show you this clip. This is a specialist. She's from Colorado, and they have a pretty good education system that has been funded by the legalization of marijuana. And they just they do a lot of stuff before other stuff is known to be important, like science of teaching reading. So we're going to listen to this scholar talk about, and I just want for you to listen to her words, critically listen to her, and be writing things down, even like keywords and phrases that we've talked about, specific things that are best practices for ELL students, and why it's so important for us to be, supporting language learning every day.
Not all formulas for cow's milk.
It's pretty short. It's just a segment of her super long, but very good section.
Is instruction for these kids different, or is it just plain old good teaching? Are there specific effective methods that a teacher should be using that are different than she would use for other students?
What we want to make sure that all students, actually, there are effective practices for monolingual English speakers and our English language learners. So indeed, you want to explicitly go through each of the steps of what they are learning. You need to recheck to make sure that it was understandable, that they comprehended. And then you want to have them have lots of practice. But our English language learners need much modeling, and our teachers need to be expert models for these students and help them along the way. They must also make sure that the students feel comfortable in trying and attempting this new language. What happens to our English language learners is they are working on learning the new language while also trying to learn a new.
I didn't know that she said this, but I literally say that all the time. These kids are knocking it out of the park while learning simultaneously. How they do it, I don't know, but some of my best writers have been advanced high English language learners in high school, just phenomenal writers. And once they get a hold of the language, man, it's just, they were off to the races. So let's continue really quickly.
Content. So it's twice the cognitive work, learning the language and learning the content and the language of that content area.
So it's good teaching plus. How can technology help in that?
Well, technology, for example, you can get books on tape. It's very important also for our students to be able to pronounce the words and the sounds correctly. So you can have that books on tape exist for these students.
Okay, we have way more than that, than books on tape, but you get the point that I'm trying to make here. So let's go back. All right, guys. So what things did she talk about? Strategies that we know, because we're going to go to a separate document and go even deeper into specific strategies. We're going to take a look at my favorite TEA document really quickly, and then to another that was developed, I think, an Education Week by educators, and it's very good. So, what are some of the strategies that she said, that she spoke on, that we have discussed together, considering, what did she say ELL students need? She said their task is difficult. They're doing twice the cognitive demand. Constant conversations.
We also need to model for our ELL students.
Yes,
We
model.
need to model a lot. Mm-hmm.
Model
Yes.
everything. So if there's an end product and there needs to be feathers on it, 7 feathers, and you need to make it and show them with the 7 feathers on it. Model, but also, and most sort of like foundational, is the modeling and the correct enunciation and the slowing down, especially for someone like me, who's an adult with ADHD, and I often go on, to speaking quickly. When I am in front of students that are English language learners, I have to remind myself that they are listening to new phonemes, new speech sounds, trying to make it part of their listening repertoire in their ear. And so I have to make sure that I'm not, saying slang or not enunciating, because that enunciation is that modeling of native spoken English is very important to the first step, to the listening process, to getting beginners to hear the speech sounds. So model, and then I'm going to write model again, model everything, right? But
yes,
especially speech, right?
yes,
Native English speech. And she said something else that I have always said, that ELL practices, strategies, supports, things we keep in mind before we teach anything, that we have done for so long in English language arts and reading, and they just made it to where, like in the maybe 2006, 2007-ish, made it to where everyone had to, pull their weight as far as helping students acquire English language in a more structured way, that modeled, where math teachers were focusing on particular language objectives also, in addition to their math academic objectives. So modeling the speech for everyone. These practices are best practices for everyone. Whether you're a monolingual English speaker, meaning that you're a native English speaker and that's all you speak, or you are an English language learner, or you have some sort of learning disability, special ed, just ADHD, so many under the umbrella, where English language learner strategies are so helpful and important. So let's take a look at some of them. And you guys, these are some of the ones in the new article. But the picture word inductive model. And so that's using the picture word inductive model. This woman says it's one of the most effective instructional techniques. And I didn't realize that that's what it was called specifically, but it's, tying language to words. And she goes further. The benefits of using PWIM with English language learners are many. This literacy technique is flexible and can be used cross-curricularly, no matter what grade level, language level, or content. PWIM leverages students' funds of knowledge and builds upon them. Through PWIM, English learners are engaged in thinking in all language domains, speaking, listening, reading, and writing, with scaffolds and supports such as visuals and sentence frames or sentences. And so you can use this method. Why did it do that? I just want it on one page. Why is it doing the 2-page business? Okay, here it is. Single page. Thank you very much. So let's take a look at some examples here of the PWIM, picture word. What is it? Induction model. I was under the impression it was image model, but it's not because that'd be redundant. But let's take a look at what it does. It does involve utilizing all of the language. And we're not going to go in and watch the video here, but there's other things that they can do. Find somebody who has information about something else, or have them do a jigsaw with their different insects that they have, or the same insect. But if you look at the visuals, you have the visual and then the words, and you see the sentence frames here. Bees are fuzzy. That's a sentence that they could play around with the language and know, what they were saying in a way that will resonate with them. They can also do this graphic organizer here. Our insects are small, or what is it? Bees are insects, small, tiny, important, and bees have, and all the different things they have and this helps them, put language into different categories of function, spoken and grammatically. Sentence frames, incredibly important, and they're honestly important for everyone. Everyone can do better with better sentence frames. I would often give my AP students, like if I wanted them to try to write more analytically and fancy, I'd give them a few sentence frames for them to start their opening paragraphs, or ways in which they could say particular things. There's nothing wrong with setting up a model, which is all a sentence frame is, in order for them to play with. So we use them all the time. Sentence frames, with word banks, visual vocabulary, also, as also with the words. So, and another really important reason, the use of sentence frames for writing and speaking not only give English language learners a framework to communicate through both oral and written language, sentence frames also help build student self-efficacy. Like they can begin to play and build new sentences. When students have the language to contribute to classroom discussions and are able to express their thoughts on paper, they begin to feel a part of the class community. And that really does make all the difference. I can't imagine being the little brilliant minds that they are and not just have like the way that they want to say it. And so why not provide ways in which they could participate? Utilizing sentence frames could be used in so many ways for discussions, and assignments, checking for understanding. This is really important, and I definitely wanted to go over this with you guys. Comprehensible input. We sort of spoke on it a little bit, and the woman before spoke on it, as far as making sure that we are being good models for our students. Comprehensible input means that the teacher speaks in such a way that students are able to understand what is being said, even when they do not know or understand all the words being stated. Below are some strategies to make input comprehensible. Comprehensible means understandable. To comprehend something, it is to understand something. So we need to make it to where what we're doing makes it more comprehensible. One of the things we can do, and we spoke about, is to slow down rate of speech. Someone like me, I have to remind myself and enunciate clearly. As students are listening, they're also working to process what is being said and how that fits with what they already know. At the same time, ELLs are translanguaging and making sense of teachers' academic language. ELLs are developing their English language, and it is important that they hear those initial and ending sounds of the word in order to add them to their vocabulary. Sometimes when we speak too quickly, we drop important sounds such as ing, like you'd say singing instead of singing. And that does make a big difference, especially when the beginning portion of learning a new language is the phonemes. It's the speech sounds. So if someone's, sort of giving you incorrect speech sounds or speech pronunciations, surely you won't be able to, gain everything you need to know. Avoid using figurative language or idioms. That speech that's sort of particular to our culture, all that and a bag of chips, or get out of here, expressing your shock to someone. So avoiding that figurative language, it never, ever translates in any language well. It always just means nonsense because it's a cultural understanding and not really something having to do with an comprehension of language. And that's really one of the last stages. The advanced high students can understand figurative language because they've also become so acculturated that they're able to, with minimum to no support, figuring out, an idiom specific to America. While these phrases might make sense to you and emphasize a point, and they might make sense to most of your students, but to ELLs, they might break down their comprehension. And that's just an act of frustration. Remember, they're using double the amount of cognition that's going on. And then so just throw in something like, oh, this exam is going to be a piece of cake. And I mean, not that that would be a bad thing, but when they don't get cake, it says it right there, saying it was a piece of cake. Translation, so it was a portion of dessert, not it was easy. So it might make ELL stop listening as they try to figure out what the idiom means. So that's another thing. It pulls away focus, which is why you always want to, and this is, again, not just for ELL students, it literally is best practice for everyone. Pre-teach any academic specific vocabulary and or social vocabulary that you think your students lack. Remember, oral language proficiency comes from them knowing words and being able to use them. A lot of our native English speakers, they monolinguistic with just English, their oral language proficiency is low because they spend a lot of time not doing think pair shares, not doing group conversations, or having to talk to the Miss Saucedas or the Mr. Guerras or Morenos of the world. And it took a toll. So having the students practice in a safe place, having them talk all the time, but we have to make them feel comfortable by doing these other supports, having these other ways to make their lives easier, certainly not by trying to use figurative language. This is a really great one also, the total physical response. This is the one that I was telling you about. This is really great because it activates the body. And for some reason, when you activate the body, when you're learning a new thing, that it just sort of resonates, or your neurological pathway is sort of deeper and more defined than if you had not had a physical movement, a physical response. And so that even has to do with annotating, which is why I ask you guys to do it. Not only am I asking you to engage in metacognition, thinking about your thinking, but that physical activity of writing notes and writing down, chunking the text and writing what it's mostly about helps you internalize that. So the example I gave you last time was that if a teacher were working with beginner students and they're talking about emotions, emotion words like happy, sad, afraid, that they would act those out. Everybody would stand up and the teacher would stand at the front of the class and, just like, oh, I'm like very sad, and do like the crying baby hands, and the students would understand and repeat the word sad. But it's not just limited to that particular strategy. That's just one strategy in utilizing gestures and the total physical response. So language can sometimes be abstract and not precise. There can also be words that exist in English that do not exist in other language. For example, toes do not have a Spanish equivalent. They're just dedos. They're just like on your hands or they're on your feet, right? In Spanish, we have hand fingers and feet fingers. Using exaggerated gestures can help make the new meaning of the new vocabulary more clear to the students. So it helps them visualize it, make it more clear but then also it helps them internalize it because they're moving, and will make it more likely that they internalize that new vocabulary. So utilizing that whenever possible with our ELL students.
For English language learners, given a textbook, what is the best approach for a teacher if they're gonna find vocabulary? So we need to show model first what they're gonna be doing.
Right.
Or
so
if they're lost and they have a text, because that's one of the questions in the PPR. What should as a teacher do when we assign a textbook to an ELL?
You should absolutely pre-teach any academic specific vocabulary. I don't care if they're defined on the side of the page in the textbook. You didn't do it with visuals or the way that it needs to be done in any sort of meaningful way. Let's take a look at some examples. I bet I can find some cool ones just really quickly now that we're on it, because guys, vocabulary instruction is so important. It's important for all of the content areas. And so if you have students and okay, a few of them need a couple of extra words because they might not understand it, then it behooves you, because they're already cognitively frustrated from doing double the work. It behooves you to do the extra work for them, so that when they get to that new word you knew they were going to have trouble with, they won't have trouble with it because they just looked at pictures or a little video, maybe an audio, maybe we stood up and we did something in response to understand what that meant, like the word furious or something. Like maybe they got up and acted it out because it was going to be it wasn't part of the academic vocabulary, but maybe you needed to define it. So whatever the case may be, doing that for the students is always best practice. And we're going to look up really quickly.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sauceda. You answered my question.
Okay.
So standing up, doing gestures, pre-teach all the time, and visuals or tape, anything that will help our ELL students.
Visual.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes,
thank you so much. That's one of the questions that we need to have consideration, because those are the questions in PPR exam. What will as a teacher do with ELL? So yes, I have everything written down already. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So here's an example of really good, and you can do this on your computer. We drew it out, made a PDF, and just would change it, put different pictures in there. Thank goodness for technology. But we used to have to draw these out on butcher paper, to try to define new words for them. It's not enough just to read whatever the definition is, and then that's suddenly going to make them understand how to use it or what it means. We need to just come at them from different perspectives, the characteristics, examples. Sometimes they do non-examples. Some people have sentences, but one thing is always there, and it is a visual. That visual connection to the word in bold, very, very important. FAIR model is my go-to for vocabulary instruction. And so if I had to have a slideshow and it had 5 different FAIR models that we had to go over, then that's what we did before we even started. Because the content is going to be challenging in it of itself. Obviously, it all is for the grade level that they're doing for them. They don't need extra challenge with not understanding words that are there. And so part of being able to, if there's a textbook, you should have done direct instruction of any academic vocabulary that was there. They should not read anything that you have in direct instructed vocabulary for. And in this way, that gives them examples or opposites, puts it in a sentence. Maybe they put it in their own student-friendly definition, and with the illustration, so that they have that, tangible connection and illustration, so that they can see, what does this word mean? What does it not mean? How would I use it in a sentence? Vocabulary activities are so very important, especially in other, they've gotten better over the years, but it's just really important for every single content area to be big on vocabulary. It helps so much with students being able to engage in a competent way in class. They can do it. We just have to illustrate it for them. So here's one that shows you life cycle metamorphosis. And so Shows all of it here. It did 2 different words, I suppose. That's kind of confusing for students, but utilizing vocabulary, you know, all the time. Utilizing powerful dialogue to practice oracy, expanding student thinkings, practicing, being able to practice speaking, listening and speaking skills. Listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. But we know that they need to be able to speak, to practice to speak. My grandma used to say que suelte la lengua, you know, that they become comfortable, and then it's just they're off to the races. In order to make meaning of anything we say in classroom, any student has to develop oracy, proficiency in oral expression and comprehension, listening and speaking skills, understanding, listening, and speaking of others. So think pair shares, having them move from different pairs, like work in pairs, and they go to another pair and have conversations, collaborative work, collaborative oracy, having them work together to practice these skills. Okay, that's the end of it. But what else can we write on here? We just read many different, what's one that like is a like a subject that we would need to like summarize off here regarding English language learner strategies? We just talked about several. What about the TPR? What did that stand for? And what did it mean? What does it mean for us as teachers? The total physical response, right? What does it mean for us? It means use movements, use kinesthetics, right? Why is it doing that? Not kinesio. Tactile. Is it wanting to? Like, why is it wanting to spell tactical? So the TPR, utilizing best practices, is infusing all of the learning preferences. But this physical response to learning is important because it sort of solidifies the idea that when we do something and there's movement or touch or kinesthetics, even if it's something as simple as like rewriting things in your own word, that there is an internalization of that knowledge where the stronger than simply not including physicality to it, the kinesthetics. So what else? What else did we read in the article right now about specific strategies to do with students to support them in their learning? We just talked about one right now.
Giving them sentence frames.
Right, sentence frames. And that we could use, oh, hold on, why is it doing that?
Technology, right? They can see a video to see those prints and visuals.
I thought that was an important distinction that because I think I often like leave that out. And I'm not going to do that anymore since it was pointed out, but that sentence frames are really good starters. It gives leverage, a support, a scaffold for them to play with the language. And they're great also for participation in class discussions, especially at the lower levels. you know, having different types of sentences and different things that they can practice saying within the context of the content. So I think one of the important points for us to remember is that sentence frames can be written, can be used for written and oral practice in the language, which is really nice. What was another thing that you guys said right now? I don't know if someone's talking. Did someone put anything in the chat? Sentence frames. What else? It's something that we said already, but it's worth mentioning again. Visuals, right? Visuals. Always, always visuals. Especially when we're doing vocabulary, you can't just define something and explain what it means and then not try to illustrate in some sort of way the abstractness of a new word and just its denotation, right? Its definition. That is not enough for our students to gain comprehension, and that's the goal. So honestly, I just sort of, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. And I want for, especially during my vocabulary instruction, for them to feel like, man, I got a strong hold on these 4 words. Or every day we're learning some new, and we'll talk about them, we'll write about them, utilizing them that day and maybe the next days, continuing to build our proficiency with that particular language. And if we're all doing it, man, the kids will be off the charts. And I know that we do this because the kids that have graduated, they are just doing amazing things and being amazing speakers and writers and whatnot. So teachers have been doing a really great job about this, but with our instruction, certainly at the vocabulary level, I want to get this to certainly with vocabulary, visuals or vocabulary, visual models, visual posters, markers, right? I'm gonna write another one, and I want for y'all to think about what that meant. But one of the big words was, and I said it's important, comprehensible. Comprehensible input. Who remembers what that was about? What did it say that was important about English language learners and comprehensible input? What does that mean? It's a strategy, but also a duty. Comprehensible means it's able to be understood, understandable input. And that meant that we had to be model English. Oh my goodness, why did it do that? Okay. Model English speakers. Enunciating. Slow down.
Enunciating means, what is the meaning?
To pronounce every sound that sound slowly and correctly. So to make sure that you are pronouncing the individual speech sounds so that the students understand how it's properly spoken.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sauceda.
Absolutely. You know, with our ELL students to go easy on the slang terminology and the idioms and the figurative language. So no slang, idioms, figurative language. You're going to create cognitive frustration, and they might take up time thinking like, what did she mean all that in a bag of chips? And now they haven't listened to the next 10 things that I said that they actually needed to be listening to, because they're trying to figure out something I said being funny. And we don't do it on purpose, but we just have to be mindful. You know, maybe if you're going to say something like that, you take time to instruct, say, okay, guys, I know I just said all that in a bag of chips. What does that mean? You know, and maybe like instruct if you're going to be speaking in that way. But certainly anything that you know is going to be not understood easily, you should make easier. So that sort of eliminates that. Model English speaking, enunciating, slow down, pair with pictures, which is another word for what? It's another word for visuals.
Is it the picture word inductive model?
Yeah, the picture word inductive model, that was another part, but pictures with words, pair our pictures with words, and then have them sort of understand what's going on in the picture and try to understand the language play with it. That was the what was it? Picture. Let's go back to it. But yes, you're right. That's what it's called. Where did it go? Where's my... I also wanted to show you this. One of the students, sometimes students annotate literally everything. You don't have to, but I mean, I can tell he's going to do fantastic, but and I can tell that he listened to the videos just by reading his notes. Because he goes into, this came right after my cheat sheet. And in one of the videos, in many of them, I discuss how the diversity section here is so small and doesn't even really cover everything that diversity really means right now in pedagogy. And so he actually added some of the things that I know I discussed, like the diversity of your lesson, like making sure that you are providing alternative pathways, diverse pathways to success, whether that be in your lesson, whether that be in your assessment type, you know, providing multiple options for the student to assess, you know, to take as a measurement. They're going to choose the one that they like the most, right? That they're okay with the most, that they feel strongest in, maybe even the one that they love, if it's something having to do with technology, or if it's like an oral thing, or maybe they like to write essays and they want to write an essay. I mean, there's students like that, but allowing them to choose the way in which they show you what they know, allowing them to choose the way in which, you know, they can shine, is really important and goes a long way for kids investing in an assessment if they chose the way in which manner in which they're being assessed. And so, but that you have to diversify your stuff. You have to have diverse assessments for like multiple, you know, things, diverse ways for them to understand. Diversity is not just, you know, culture. There's so many ways in which the students are varied and different. And we don't change our lesson objective to meet the needs of, you know, 30 different students. We create a lesson and objective and provide particular support so that the myriad diverse populations will succeed. Like pre-teaching academic vocabulary, like, you know, adding think, pair, shares. You know, we do particular things, adding visuals and examples and modeling and giving guided practice before you actually have them do something independently, especially if it's something that's challenging and or scary. I mean, there's adults that are still afraid of math. And so to think that like little kids aren't, and some of them are not, which I love, but most of them are, because they have parents and they're like, I'm not good at math. And that fear just sort of like rolls over, and there's no reason to be afraid. We all can be good at math. It's literally the first language. It's universal everywhere. It's the same in every language, in every culture. And so very important that they not be afraid of that. But and there was a point to me, but there's different proficiencies for our students, different fears, they come from different backgrounds, taking that into consideration when you are building your lessons, when you are thinking about the types of things you're going to be doing with your students. Because remember, domain 1 is all about planning. It's the plan of action and all the thinking that goes, that you have to do regarding the objective that you're going to be measuring, like they're trying to achieve, and then measuring the students on the diverse population, the particular resources that you choose, the quality resources that you choose in order to help your students, and all of those different supports. And domain 3 is about you actually doing those things that you planned, and the way in which your class functions in the thick of the lesson, during the lesson. What responsive feedback techniques are you utilizing? Are you at your desk? Are you moving around the classroom, measuring student knowledge by listening to conversations and then jumping in when need be? That's what domain 3 is about, and supporting students and giving them timely feedback so that they can make corrections. Because if we leave our assessments to always be at the end of class, I'm going to give this exit ticket and that'll show me if they know the objective. But there's so many nuanced things, honestly, in an objective, especially for English language arts and reading, that just doesn't really do what I'm really trying to measure justice. So there'll be markers throughout the class period, throughout the lesson, where I check for understanding specifically in different ways, asking poignant questions, walking around the classroom during their activity while they're answering questions together, so that I can right then and there, if need be, make adjustments, not leave it until it ends up in an essay or it ends up on a 6 weeks exam or an end of course exam. That responsive instruction is supposed to help circumvent, the problem from solidifying later. You stop it right then and there, not necessarily stop it, but you guide the student and you don't let them, continue on a path of mistakes, and that increases student frustration. And we know that they sort of give up. We all do. It's a human nature. Other things that he's written down: when I ask you guys to annotate your standards and send them in so that you can get permission to take the exam, this is sort of what they look like. I'm not saying you have to highlight all the words, but if you go in, and I'm not going to make you, because for one, it's sideways, but for two, we don't have time. But the things that he's saying are important, and I know that he extracted from what I said, important comments from the videos. So as you're watching the videos, please have these with you, so that your standards, so that you can, be actively working with that knowledge. When you write it down, when you draw something like, I'm going to write this here because it's going to be our last note for this thing, but the prayer model, because it's my favorite. I feel like there's not even another type of way to teach vocabulary. I just didn't. This was the way I taught vocabulary. So Freyer model, let's do, here's my box. I told you guys that I am terrible at drawing, and prior to the internet, like even when the internet had already started, it was already a thing, but it wasn't huge. And we had we could use clip art, and I remember thinking, thank God for Microsoft, because we had clip art. And my students didn't have to suffer through my horrible drawings anymore. And then so typically you have the word in the center, and then you have the different sections here, the definition, the visual in the center, and the word somewhere else. I mean, people play around with it different ways. And so there's the definition here, maybe a picture here. just going to write sun. And the words here, but so you get the idea. FRAIR model, very important that we at the very least go over this basic knowledge with every new academic specific vocabulary word that the students are going to be introduced to. So very important. I know I told you guys that we would start domain 2, and I want to start domain 2. It's just that I really didn't feel like we delved deep enough into ELL support. And I wanted to make sure that we did that because that is such a huge component for domain 1 and domain 3. So going back into our standards document, looking at standard 2, the teacher creates a classroom environment of respect and rapport that fosters a positive climate for learning, equity, and excellent. So that's the type of climate we're supposed to be creating. It's supposed to be conducive for learning, conducive for equity for all, everybody's equal, and conducive for excellence, where the students can be excellent and we expect excellence from everyone. Everyone. I expected excellence of my ELL students and they served it to me every single time. They just really knocked it out of the park. But I made them believe, because I believed that they could do it. Certainly with the supports that were available, we could do anything. So creating that classroom environment where people feel respected and they feel a sense of belonging. That's everything that's in standard 2. And that's everything that appears in domain 2 of the exam. So as I mentioned before, they're going to be very sort of tight-lipped. These standards are broad. They don't go into the specifics, like the importance of communicating enthusiasm for learning. So that's just one little statement, but it's really important. And there's a lot of sort of conversation and things in which we do in order to convey that to the students that are not explicitly stated here. But biggest takeaways from standard 2, creating that environment of respect and rapport, establishing an environment for learning and excellent. Same thing. It's just a different verb trying to be fancy here. Creating and establishing is the same, but you have to have things in place. And as always, as we were just talking about, and Ms. Ramos pointed out, model. You have to model respect to other teachers, to the students, to the custodial staff, and just everyone. Modeling it, because you cannot expect the students to behave in a way that you are currently not behaving or that you don't behave. This is not going to happen. So you have to cultivate that, establishing or creating that environment for learning, that environment for excellence. You have to create a sense of, I don't know, teamship or like camaraderie with the students. And I have spoken many times, I wish I could find one right now to show you guys, about my first assignment that I did for, I don't know, however much, like, I think I maybe started it my 3rd year teaching. So I did it for like 13 years. But doing my dialectical journal. So I had the students do a lot of metacognitive activities in that book, but we spent the first week getting to know each other, learning the procedures, learning the rules, looking over the particulars of our goals for the semester via the syllabus, types of things we'd be learning, skills we'd be acquiring. But that first activity, creating their, dialectical notebook or dialectical journal, and I call them DJs, was they had an assignment. They had to put pictures on it. It was like a scavenger hunt and a collage of shorts, and it allowed me to learn so much about them. They had to do very English related things. They had to get a quote from like their favorite book, like a family quote. There was particular things that they had to include in their visualization, and then they could include anything extra also. So it really gave me a good and it also had the name that they gave themselves the first day of my class. So I always played a game with them where we learned each other's names, and I learned everyone's name on the first day. It's just like this game. It's called the name game. And so I would give them a thesaurus or a dictionary, and they would have to choose a name to describe themselves, a word to describe themselves that begins with the same letter. So I was scholarly Sauceda one year, or saucy Sauceda, and studious Sauceda. So I had to choose, an adjective that describes me that starts with my name. And so every student would choose one on that first day of school. Then we would play a game, and I'd throw a ball around to them, which was tactile and fun because people had to catch it. And I always went first and I always went last. And so if somebody forgets, you have to say everybody's name that went before you. So I would say Saucy Sauceda, and the next person would be like Brainy Brandy, Joking Josh. And so the person that goes next in the line has to remember everyone else's names. And of course the students would forget. We'd get through and they'd be laughing, and we'd be laughing, and I'm remembering, and by the next day I know everybody's name. That also has to be like center in the front of their dialectical journal. It's sort of like a funny thing that even some of my students that are very old now still remember the name that they chose for themselves. So we did this not because I thought they were going to become amazing English writers in that first week by doing that. I was building rapport and respect, getting to know who they are, understanding their strengths. Many kids, the artsy kids, theirs really shone out. Other kids, I knew who they were by the pictures, by the things that they particularly chose, and it helped. And then we all did like this oral thing where they had to show us their DJ to the class, what things that they chose to include. They didn't have to do the whole thing. They just had to choose 3 or 4 things from the list of requirements that they chose to include on theirs. And it helped us all get to know each other, but specifically me as their teacher. And during that time, I started building, my expectations for them, and, my expectations for the quality of the work that they turned in, to their behavior towards each other, because I only like kindness. And that's a thing I used to say all the time in my classroom, because I just do. I just don't think that there's a need for people to be unkind to each other. So building that in the beginning, setting up the particular steps so that your students are in a classroom where they feel respected, where they can learn, where they value learning, where they know, okay, we're coming here to learn. Because I would always tell them, like, we're going to learn every day. I mean, we might have so much fun, but we're going to be learning every single day, practicing our oral language proficiency, becoming knowledgeable. I made it fun for them, and it wasn't always, amazing and worked out exactly the way that I wanted it to. But then I went back to the drawing board and made adjustments on whatever lesson, or tried to bring in more things in order to rectify what was missing from the magic, for making it quality, where they could be engaged in it. Because if this doesn't happen here, what we're discussing in standard 2, that creation, remember I told you, I don't care what kind of an amazing lesson somebody has written, maybe tailor-made for the students, but if the teacher doesn't have particular things in place, many times learning will not happen at all. If certain established sort of classroom norms that have been put in place, like my students knew, if ever I'm absent and I come back and the substitute says, that it was really important to me that no matter who came into my classroom, that the students were going to respect them, that they were not going to try, because sometimes kids will try to trick their students and be like, well, Miss Elsa lets us do whatever. And a good substitute will know that that's complete malarkey. But however, sometimes it does, especially a long time ago, certain things would be broken. It was important that my students understood, and I made that known, that I don't care who comes in this classroom, we're going to treat them with respect. And if they give us, a directive, it's just like if I were here, and part of that respecting the classroom was making sure that the kids cleaned up after themselves. one of the differences between American education and education in, let's say, Korea, we hosted teacher interns from Korea, South Korea. ESISD did. And so they came to our campuses. And at the time I was at Edinburgh High, I was a teacher at Edinburgh High. So it was really cool because one of them was assigned to me. And I remember like they would just freak out at the amount of time that we had to plan. Like they couldn't believe it. There's only this much time for this little time and for all of these students, because they have less students and more time to prepare for their classes. Only makes sense if we want to do things properly. Another big glaring difference was how little the students had to participate in keeping the campus and their classrooms clean. In their schools, all of them, there are no custodians. That's not a job. They are the custodians. Like they have to, at the end of class, doesn't matter what class you ended up, you're sweeping, you know, and there's like people have different jobs. They work together to get it done. And I feel like it's a reason why also in like Japan and, you know, there's a lot less pollution and stuff like that. But because since they were in school, they have been taught and practiced the skill of, you know, collectively keeping things tidy and clean and not relying on someone to clean up your mess ever. So that's something that, although it's not stated here, it's something that plays a really, really big part in getting the students. Like they have to respect the classroom as a whole, the desks, the floor. We don't want to see any pencils on the floor. And I would just explain it. Everybody loved out Mr. Gonzalez, the 8th grade, or he was 7th grade and then 8th grade custodian that would come up, and I would tell him, don't you make Mr. Gonzalez have to do anything in this classroom when he comes, you know, and they sort of took it as a staple of pride that he didn't have to do anything much when they came to the classroom, because I wanted for them to have that ownership. That ownership helps with a sense of pride for the community of learners that we have and the place. So classroom procedures, very important. So for something, keeping your classroom tidy, making sure that you save enough time for that to be something that the students do before you leave. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know TEA wants for us to maximize instructional time, but it's important to teach them other things as well, like cleaning up after themselves. So certainly, you know, you would create time and manage your schedule in your class and procedures to help facilitate cooperation and productivity throughout. Managing student behavior. Managing student behavior, understanding theories and techniques for monitoring student behavior. I mean, if you are noticing that a student is exhibiting a particular behavior, then you need to collect more data. What is happening during, and I'll give you an example of when I had to do this myself. I had to figure out why this particular student was having a meltdown when she never did before. She'd never had meltdowns before, and now she was. And I was teaching at South Middle School at the time, and we had gotten a new student maybe about 3 weeks before, and he sat before the student, you know, that I'm referring to, who was having the meltdowns and really shutting down or having just flat out meltdowns. And she's a brilliant girl, special ed student on the spectrum. And so it was she never a behavior problem, like at all, like not an academic problem, not a behavioral problem. She could literally read a book and also pay attention to the lecture. She could do multiple things. But so now she's having these like issues, right? And I'm have to figure it out. So I'm watching over days for things, and I finally figured it out. But it was the student in front of her was jiggling there was it before her or behind her? In any event, jiggling there was like a rack underneath the desk. And so like, if you just move your feet even lightly, like just even lightly shaking your foot on it, like I guess you could feel it on the desk. And that was what was going on. It was just like slight movements on that thing. And it would increasingly, you know, a little touch here of her foot on the cage, or a little touch there of the wiggling on the cage. Not anything to where I would notice it and be able to say, or there was no interaction between the two of them. But when I finally figured it out, it was so easy. And that was the end of it. Like literally just the end of it. She couldn't handle like the jarring movement during the class. And it wasn't jarring in a traditional sense, but just to her, it was. And so just paying attention, looking for like, what is it a certain time during the class? Is it a certain, no, it was when she reached her limit of like movement or touching on the basket underneath. So, and it wasn't the first touch or the first jiggle, you know, she had like a threshold that she had to meet and then melt down. We might put kids on an Excel sheet. If you have a difficult classroom and they're getting out of their seats or talking out of turn, and telling them, okay, guys, we're going to monitor our behavior and let them know, like, we're going to be looking for calling out of turn. Remember, we raise our hands or we wait to be called on. And we respect our friends when they're talking. So we certainly don't talk over them. And we stay in our seats unless you have permission. So if that's something that you're working on, you would have those behaviors on a chart with the students' names, and you would be charting which students are doing the infractions. And once you know what's happening or who you need to speak with, you can speak with them and try to move those behaviors down. It's something that you can use with special ed students when you have undesirable behaviors, like students with ADHD. They cannot help it. They literally get out of their chairs. I get it. I'm ADHD too. However, I need you to work on it. You got out of your chair 5 times today. I need you to move it down to 3 tomorrow, or like 4 or 3, work with them to move towards manageable goals, move within their means. And I've never met, speaking on student behavior in my life, and I've met thousands and have had thousands of students, never met a student who was misbehaving just for the heck of it. Something awful is going on in their lives. Something awful has gone on in their lives. And most of the time, student misbehaviors, even in class, are like a cry for some sort of help. They are uncomfortable in their current situation. And I've seen it time and time again when students would rather be a behavioral issue than to be known as like, someone who's not good at math. So they're just going to act up in math class. And that's why they don't finish their work, because they act up. But it's because they're scared to try the work. And it just takes someone to say, this isn't scary. You just had some, weak instruction along the way, not enough pictures, manipulatives, but we can do this together, and show them baby steps, resilience against difficult things. And so when managing student behaviors, you never want to sort of like increase the conflict, take things personally. I guarantee you a student doesn't have a personal vendetta against you. They just have a difficult situation, and you are in the line of fire today if they came at you in some type of way. These are students, as we've discussed many times, and we just reviewed in domain 1, whose brains are not even fully formed. And many are dealing with things that I certainly never had to deal with. Never. My parents aren't divorced. I didn't have any sort of like, there's mass incarceration right now. I never had to deal with that. I never had to deal with like mom not coming home and going to like, I don't know, California to try to make it in like what is it, that new job where you go and you're a brand person, you do like Snapchat or Instagram. I don't know. The kids are dealing with some stuff. So we need to first and foremost make sure that they know that they are respected and valued in our classroom, because especially a student who feels respected and valued in your classroom is going to try their best not to lose it, even if their world is falling apart. And I've had one student really melt down, and his world was falling apart. It just was one of the worst child abuse cases that I have heard of as a teacher. And he had a meltdown. Somebody was saying something to him and he just lost it. And he was even rude to me. He came back that day and apologized, like with tears in his eyes. And I told him, love, I get it. You had a bad day. We are good, you know, but they don't want to let their teachers down, you know, and especially those ones that are misbehaving, they need a little bit of tenderness, you know, try a little tenderness first before bringing down the hammer and, you know, sending them to the office. They don't need another adult that ignores them, and probably they're acting out because they have adults that ignore them. Nobody healthy is yelling at somebody else, only people who are hurting. So keep that in mind, managing student behavior. One of the best strategies to get a buy-in, and what I do that first week while we're doing our first major project, the assembling the DJ, is we also come up with the class rules. And I tell them, guys, we're going to come up with social norms. Like, this is a society of Sauceda, and we're going to come up with norms that we have to behave with. We already discussed the things we have to do this year, the things the state wants us to be able to do, the things the district wants us to do, the things I personally want us to do, because I know we can. And so what kind of environment do we need to have in order for that to take place? Again, including students in the creation or in the decision-making process is inviting them to take ownership and have agency in the learning experience. We're not just, you know, the waitresses of education, bringing them the, like, here you go, 7th grade English language arts and reading. It's an experience together, you know, with the student. We have to take them super into consideration. We need their buy-in for sure. We can't do it without them. Can't be successful without them. But if you create your social contract together, the standard of conduct in your class, the rules, and everyone's there discussing and giving their 2 cents, you're going to have less management problems. I guarantee you, if they were there on the day that we discussed this, they're less likely to do that very thing. And trust me, if somebody does, literally the whole class will say, dude, you were there when we all agreed we were not going to do this very thing. Like, everybody will, and there's accountability, and it's okay. So getting the students to, you know, have that buy-in with you, and the, you know, class standards. Oh, one last thing about this. You have to be clear and fair about consequences. Like, if you say there's going to be no bullying in your classroom, there's absolutely no bullying in your classroom. And there has to be, like, consequences for that. And so what I would say is, you wouldn't say, like, there's 0 bullying in my classroom. If I hear you bullying someone, I'm automatically going to speak to you outside, and you're going to go speak with the counselor until we can have a discussion again, because the person being bullied needs to feel safe, and the person bullying needs to feel stopped right away. And it doesn't have to be, you're going to the office and you're never going to be here again. No, you need to speak to someone, because obviously you're hurting because you're bullying someone, and only bullies, you know, bullies are hurt people. We know that over and over and over again. So sometimes they're so bullied and hurt that they grow up to do horrible, terrible things, which is why we have to circumvent these types of behaviors early on. So clear and consistent consequences. If the consequences are not enacted after you have said this is a rule, you will have very, very, very little sort of effectiveness over your students. You're going to lose credibility. She doesn't even punish us. And, like, he was calling me all those names that made me cry, and she listened. They're not going to feel protected. You need to, you know, do what you say and say what you do to them, your students. Because they'll be able to see through the lies and see, you know, favoritism, or letting somebody sneak diss someone else and pretending you didn't hear it. No, we're not going to sneak diss in here either. We're not going to do that. And have a particular consequence. And if the counselor gets annoyed with it, oh well, we have a no bullying policy, and they're not going to go to the office. And so you're the next best thing, because I'm going to shut it down right away, and they can come back to the class once they've, you know, gone and spoken to you about it, and you've righted the situation. All right, guys, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm sorry we didn't get to the questions just yet, the practice questions, but we will definitely do that on Wednesday. Do I have any questions?
Miss Sauceda, we will get together tomorrow, Sunday. Will you email me?
Yes, I am going to email you. Guys, you're welcome to come if you want. Miss Ramos is going to have a PPR session tomorrow to go over some questions she remembers.
Thank you, Miss Sauceda.
Yes,
Can you send me the link, Miss Stephanie, please?
Yes,
for tomorrow?
I will.
Thank
Okay,
you.
you'll let us know the time, right, Miss Sauceda?
Yes, I'm going to email you guys right now.
Okay, thank you so much for everything, Ms. Sauceda. In
Yes.
reference to the last part that we just discussed, let's say we're teachers, we start our school year, we have problems with students with behavior or not behavior, maybe some kind of problem of ADHD. What is the first proper thing for a teacher to do? First, monitor the student and take notes. How many weeks? Like a week or two?
Yeah,
and then make a report.
Yeah, over a week, monitor the student if they're having, behavioral issues, and especially, if they're special ed, they probably have supports put in place in their individualized education plan that tells you what particular things, because I guarantee you a team of excellent people have sat around and discussed like what particular difficulties he will have as a result of the disability, and what particular supports need to be in place in order for him to not get, off task or get into a behavioral issue. And so a lot of times, sometimes what we have is that maybe sometimes the teacher's not providing all of the appropriate accommodations and they're seeing an increase of misbehavior, but because they're not all being maybe they give 8 different accommodations, but the teacher's only implementing 4 of them, right? Only the ones academic, not the ones behaviorally. Well, that's going to have an effect on your class. Those were specifically decided by a team of people based on their specific disabilities. Yeah. So first, go to the IEP. Anytime it's special ed, go to the IEP. And make sure all accommodations and supports are being implemented to the T.
Okay, but let's say I started pre-K4 class and I'm a teacher. What is the steps? Because that question comes in the PPR exam. Let's say I'm starting the year, I have a pre-K4 student that the first thing to do, I don't go and consult with the counselor or with the principal.
No. You just monitor, and you might even monitor for 2 weeks. You just got them at the beginning of the year. They could have separation anxiety. Remember, they're in 4th grade. Not in 4th grade. They're in pre-K4, right? Pre-K4. We know they're early child. We know that they like to be with their mom. They might be acting out because they have separation anxiety. Give them a couple of weeks after monitoring, and it might go away. The behavior goes away, and you don't even have to talk to anyone, right?
Okay, exactly. But let's say that they do have a problem. So the next step after the monitor, we don't contact the parent because we're not the ones that are gonna do the evaluation. We're not evaluators. So what is the next step? Talk to a vice principal to get this going, or what is the steps? Because that question comes in the PPR.
Right. What other choices? They give you diagnostician and special education teacher?
Special, and go talk to the principal.
Special education teacher.
Yeah,
because the principal is he's unable to even start the process because certain assessments have to take place, and the diagnostician, exactly. So it's going to be diagnostician or special ed that goes in there. And
that's the second. So the first step is the monitor for 2 weeks, and then speak to one of the diagnostician or a special ed teacher. And then from there, we'll make a note for the parent, but they'll help me throughout if I'm a teacher, right?
Oh, yeah. You won't be making the contact with the parents for the special ed. No.
Okay. That's one of the questions.
Yeah. You might have to maybe you be pulled in for an ARD, because in order for the ARD committee to function,
meeting.
You have to have one general ed teacher there. So you might, be involved in it in that way.
In the meeting.
No, you wouldn't be letting them know. No. There's very formal legal paperwork that be signed and disclaimers and all that stuff. And so we don't do that.
We don't do that. Okay, so if in the PPR exam I have a question like that, the first thing I'm going to do is monitor the student for 2 weeks and then get in touch with the diagnostician or special ed teacher, right? That will be the correct answer.
Right.
Okay,
If
thank
there
you,
was
Ms.
an issue,
Sauceda.
if there was an issue, right.
If I see that something is, yeah, it's not right. Okay, thank you so much for that. I appreciate your answer, Miss, and helping me through.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. You guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend,
Okay.
and I will. Mr. Valdez, did you want that link for tomorrow?
Yes, please. If you could send it, thank you.
I sure will.
And the Google Doc. I don't think I received it.
You did the trade?
The Google Drive.
Okay. Okay, I will send that off to you right now.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right,
thank you.
guys.
Thank you for everything, Ms. Sauceda. Thank you so much.
Sure. It's my pleasure. You guys have a beautiful weekend.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.